This is Carla Atherton, Director of the Healthy Family Formula and host and producer of the Children's Health Summit 4. In response to the rapid rise in conditions such as autism, cancer, ADHD, GI distress, anxiety, depression, asthma, skin conditions, learning disabilities, and autoimmunity, the topic of this year's summit is preventing and reversing childhood chronic illness. And today I'm very excited to be interviewing this session speaker, Dr. Sandy Gluckman. Dr. Sandy Gluckman, founder of Parenting That Heals, is a learning, behavior, and mood specialist, author, educator, and international speaker who has consulted with and trained thousands of parents and teachers in different parts of the world. She presents a fundamental and highly effective shift in understanding how to treat and heal learning, behavior, and mood challenges, preferably without medication. Dr. Sandy's approach brings hope and healing to those that are looking for ways to help their wondrous children learn more easily, behave positively, feel good, and love life. Dr. Gluckman is not in favor of managing the symptoms children have. Instead, she removes the symptoms by finding and healing the underlying root causes. Her proven whole child treatment process is based on her unique blend of studies in functional medicine, interpersonal neurobiology, and psychology. This integrated approach treats all aspects of the child's health, spirit, body, and brain. The most unique aspect of her work is that she believes that a parent cannot give their child what they themselves don't have. And therefore, she treats and educates the parents at the same time as treating the children. Her signature healing programs called Program That Heals and Teaching That Heals the Brain have been presented in live workshops as well as online in many countries. These workshops, together with her books, are transforming the way teachers, parents, and healthcare practitioners treat the children whose lives they touch. Dr. Gluckman is the author of Parents Take Charge, Healing Learning, Behavior, and Mood Challenges Without Medication, and Who's in the Driver's Seat? Using Spirit to Lead Successfully. She also authored a chapter in Mission Possible and is published extensively in parenting, education, and business journals. She is a frequent speaker at healthcare, parenting, education, and business conferences. In private consultations, she uses a combination of individual, couples, and family counseling based on what is required in each situation. She also offers presentations, keynotes, and workshops to parents, educators, and healthcare providers around the globe, empowering them with the newest information and the tools to heal children and teens academically, emotionally, and physically. So thank you for being here and welcome, Dr. Gluckman. Welcome, Sandy.
Thank you. Hello, Carla. How are you?
So good. It's so good to see you. We've been, Dr. Gluckman, I might be slipping into calling her Sandy sometimes, so I apologize.
Don't apologize. It's absolutely fine. Everybody calls me Dr. Sandy.
Dr. Sandy, we'll put those two together. So we've been doing some work together for a while now and just really trying to get our schedules together. So I'm really excited for her to be here on this summit right now because I think that what we'll be discussing is something that we don't always discuss when we're talking about even childhood behavior. Like, you're like a psychologist and you have, people look to you for therapy, but really what you actually give them is something very unique that marries, that intersects the whole mind, body, spirit, emotional, behavioral stuff that we think is really at the forefront of these children's, what's going on with them, but also the physiological aspect of that and stress and on all those things. So we'll be unpacking that a little bit more as we talk. But I just have to say that seeing what Sandy does, Dr. Gluckman does with these children and focusing on parents and teaching the parents and how it filters down to the kids, like that is just where it's at. And so, and I love that you have a functional approach, and we'll be discussing that as well, that doesn't ignore all the other aspects that contribute to mental health and emotional well-being and relationship between parent and child, and then child with the world. So I appreciate you being here, and I'm really excited to get going, Dr. Gluckman.
Thank you, Carla. Your sound went out for a moment, but thank you for that wonderful welcome. Okay. And I'm just totally delighted to be here.
Well, great. You know what? I think actually with the sound cutting out, I think it still caught me on this end. So hopefully it all will be well. I was just saying thank you for being here, and I'm glad to be discussing these things in detail. So, okay, so first questions first. Kayla, I mentioned functional medicine, okay? So, and we'll be talking about that a little bit more during the summit. And so, but the basic is that no symptom happens in isolation. You know, the body's a system. And then the system actually involves the mind, body, and spirit. It's not just one of those things. It's all of them, and they all sort of affect each other, and they all need to happen at the same time or be addressed at the same time. So, so you believe this, and you write about this as well. So, you talk about root causes and that not being identified and adequately addressed. So that being the kind of like the underlying cause of children's behavioral issues. Could you explain more about that? Like what you mean when you're talking about that?
Yes, I'd love to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, as you said, Carla, for all practitioners of functional medicine, the basis is to understand the underlying root cause, because otherwise what we're doing is we're treating the symptoms, and it's like a Band-Aid and doesn't make the symptoms go away. We sometimes get more of the same symptoms or other symptoms unless we get to the underlying root cause. And so I think that what I have noticed over all these years is that there is, I guess I could say there are those roots that are close to the surface. Mm-hmm. You know, like if you think about a tree, you get some roots that are near the top of the soil, and then you get those roots that are really, really deep. And so I'd like to take your audience today through a journey of understanding what's behind all the symptoms that they may be seeing. And it doesn't matter what kind of symptoms we're talking about here, whether it is a physical symptom, a GI, a sensory, a learning, a behavior, a defiance, a depression. The list is long. It doesn't matter what those symptoms are. Behind those symptoms, there are two kinds of roots. Those that are a little closer to the surface, and then the very deep root cause. Mm-hmm. So for me, I see that the roots that are closer to the surface are always related to stress. Mm-hmm. And stress is a strange topic, because mm-hmm. I found over the years that when we talk about stress, people tend to either kind of just go to lunch, shut down, don't really want to hear about stress. Yet, you know, kind of, yes, we know there's stress, but there's nothing we can do about it. It's a stressful life, it's stress and pressure, and we understand there's stress, but tell me what I must do to fix my child. Yeah. And the thing is that for me, that stress is those roots that are closer to the surface, because when a child is stressed, we are going to have a spirit and a body and a brain that are dysregulated. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I guess then it might be important at this point to take a look at what exactly am I talking about when I'm talking about stress, because it's such a broad word and we use it, you know, in daily social interactions, but I want to be sure that scientifically speaking, we are all on the same page. Okay. So when I'm talking about stress, I'm speaking about the fact that all those wonderful children, the little ones and the medium-aged ones and the teenagers and the early adults, every one of us has a way of perceiving the world where we interpret something that's happening in our space as stressful, and it's different for different people. So when the minute that child feels that something is uncomfortable for them, which we would call stress, mm-hmm. it starts up something known as the HPA axis. Mm-hmm. So we've got the hypothalamus for the H, the pituitary for the P, the A for the adrenal gland, and the HPA axis just clicks into action the minute the child has the sense of, this doesn't feel safe for me, this feels unsafe, uncomfortable for me. Mm-hmm. And of course what starts happening is the hypothalamus sets the alarm, tells the pituitary we've got a problem, the pituitary tells the adrenal we need some cortisol, and the cortisol starts pumping. Well, cortisol is a fabulous hormone in the right proportions. Yeah. What happens with a lot of our wondrous kiddos who are struggling with all kinds of things is that the cortisol levels are not in the right proportion. They're not at the right level because these children are chronically stressed. And so the cortisol is getting chronically higher and higher. And high levels of cortisol will also create high levels of systemic inflammation. So we have children whose bodies and brains and spirits are inflamed. And as a result of the HPA axis, the child feeling unsafe, the HPA axis kicking into action, the cortisol levels going high on a regular basis, inflammation is growing, and the result is that when those children are in that particular state, they go straight into survival. They're in survival mode, and the survival mode is famously known as fight, flight, or freeze. And there's an additional one that's been added more recently by Dr. Siegel, which is faint. But let's talk about fight, flight, and freeze for the moment. And so, you know, Carla, what really, really worries me is that when we see children in fight, the parents and some healthcare providers and the teachers are giving it a label. They are defining it as defiance or oppositional behavior, and then they give it that horrible oppositional defiance disorder label, which I think is total nonsense. And they become known as difficult children, but literally they are physiologically incapable at that moment of time in behaving in any other kind of way if that is a fight child, because some children, when they are in their survival mode, are fight kind of kids. So they'll spit and bite and kick and scream and all those things. But then you get those children who are in flight, and so they go inwards. They become quiet, sad, withdrawn. They're afraid. They don't take risks. They really find it difficult to relate comfortably with the world. And then you get those kiddos who are in freeze mode, who are really, really totally frozen, terrified of what to do or say next in the world around them. And as I said, what worries me is that the kids who are in flight are given all kinds of diagnostic labels. And those who are in fight and those who are in freeze. And the diagnostic label doesn't tell us absolutely anything. It's actually a stigmatization that we hang around children's necks, and then it becomes a part of their identity. So I am really so, how can I say, I really, really want parents and everyone else to understand that when you see your child presenting any kind of health or behavioral or learning or mood behavior challenge, please understand, please know that one of the root causes close to the surface is that your child is experiencing stress. Your child is experiencing the world around them as unsafe for them. And that would give you such an insight in how to relate to the child at that moment instead of labeling them and seeing them as having a disorder.
Ooh, and see, parents, why I was so happy to have Sandy, Dr. Gluckman, come on, because I think this is crucial to understand, because there are so many. And Sandy, just before I keep going, I think that when you touch like the part where your camera is, it's bouncing. So I don't want anybody getting seasick. So when you don't touch it,
okay.
it's like
I'm going to change my posture.
Okay. So there.
I don't want that.
I just want to make sure everybody can watch without going like, whoa. So that's better. Thank you. But yeah, so I think that if we want any sort of healing to happen, again, in functional medicine, we're knowing more and more and more that stress, and not in the way that we've sort of like defined it before, that we don't really listen to, and it's kind of benign. It's like, yeah, everybody has stress. No, like how essential this is to any sort of, not like prevention, yeah, for sure. And then reversal, for sure. Or, addressing any sort of behavioral issues that become diagnoses that aren't necessary, like, right? Like in the end, the diagnosis isn't the issue. It's really like what is happening to that child in the beginning to cause that stress. And then how to mitigate that stress response. I love it. And I want you to keep going with this, explaining this for us. But one question I want to jump in with too is, how, like, so, like, not every child has these learning problems or, you know, mood problems, behavior problems, that, you know, challenges, as you most aptly call them. So what is it that, why do some and some do not?
I love that question, and I could go on all day about that, but I'll try and keep it short. So what happens with some children is that there could be stress while they're in the fetal stage. So if the mom is experiencing stress during the pregnancy, any kind of stress whatsoever, it's going to change the HPA axis of the fetus. And so these children are coming to the world already wired for stress. They already have the stress, the HPA stress dysregulation, even as they come into the world. And so what that means is two things. Firstly, that it tends to make them enter the world with a very sensitive temperament. They have a very sensitive nature. And secondly, and I guess they go hand in hand, and that is that makes them so much more vulnerable to stress. They become like stress magnets. They just pick it up all the time because they're as I said, the HPA axis is already dysregulated, so they're wired to sense stress very quickly. But secondly, also that they have a nervous system that is switched on high. Totally on the alert all the time, and so they are just looking for reasons and finding all kinds of things that they are interpreting as stressful. In addition, you know, Carla, there's something so interesting here, and that is that these children who come with their nervous systems alert and they're already wired for stress, they have an incredible ability to be perceptive and pick up all the energies around them. And so a look on mom's face or a tone of voice or a body language, anything, and they immediately pick it up and it changes their chemistry. So those children who have had that kind of experience and come into the world that way are the ones who are more vulnerable to stress. And then you get those children who have not had that stress during pregnancy, and they enter the world and they go, hello, here I am, bring it on, I have no problem, I'm going to go with the flow, it's all going to be fine. And they are just naturally more resilient.
Oh,
but you know, I do want to say something important, two important things here. The first one is that whoever's listening to me, if it's a mom, please, I'm asking you, do not turn this on yourself. There's no reason to feel guilty. No shame, no guilt, no blame. Please. Whatever happened, happened. And you've been doing the very, very, very best you know how. So I don't want, you know, when I talk about pregnancy, and then I don't want moms to feel sad that it happened. If it happened, here's the good news. The good news is we can rewire the children. We can rewire them so that they are resilient. So I want you to hold that thought. In actual fact, I find, because I am one of these children who were born already stressed, vulnerable to stress, and I want to tell you that my sensitive nature that came with me was a burden in the early years, being so sensitive and no one knowing how to deal with me. It was tough, but it's become my greatest gift. And the children and the families that I work with, I think they tend to see their children, the sensitive children, as weak. It is not weakness at all. That is a gift if you know how to interact with your child in a way that can convert it into a gift. Wonderful gift, being sensitive.
I love that. And maybe that leads into like another question that I had for you that I wanted to ask you eventually in this talk was why you named your program Parenting That Heals.
Yes. So the work of Dr. Daniel Siegel is just amazing and so very, very exciting. And he is the founder of interpersonal neurobiology, which has actually been the most incredible discovery. And, you know, when you think about it, it just seems absolutely 101, because what it says, interpersonal neurobiology, is that we are always changing each other's chemistry. So even as I'm speaking with you, Carla, now, the look on your face, it's changing my chemistry. And I'm changing the chemistry of the people who are listening to me. So it's not possible for parents or healthcare providers or teachers to be in the space of a child without having an impact on their chemistry. And clearly the impact is going to be one of making them feel safe or making them feel unsafe. And when I say making them, it's not as though you're doing it on purpose. No parent or teacher is purposely causing a child to feel unsafe. But what I think that the parents and teachers and healthcare providers don't realize is that your chemistry is changing the child's chemistry because of those mirror neurons. And so we have a responsibility to be sure that we are coming across in a way that is actually calming the child's nervous system, that is quieting the HPA axis, and is causing the child's heart rate to change and for the children to feel safe. Mm-hmm. So Parenting That Heals, I chose that as my program title because I actually don't see the children until the parents have been through a process with me where they have healed some of their own unfinished business, which is translating to the child as negative energy. Mm-hmm. And then I teach. And once they have healed and once they have cleared some of their own stuff, mommy and daddy, individually or together, mm-hmm. then I will see the child, and then I give the parents the tools to use interpersonal neurobiology in a way to deflame the inflammation that's in the child as a result of stress.
Yes, that's so wonderful, because then you get to the root, right? Like not what causes this child to have this response, the stress response. Also the parent. So it's Parenting That Heals, not just like as a strategy, but actually like just a way of being with your children is actually healing, because you understand what's going on under the surface. You're not blaming a diagnosis or a flaw in that child. You're not trying to fix the child. You're actually looking at yourself and your own stress response. You're looking at what's going on with them unconsciously, often out of their control. So I love that you're talking about this, Sandy, and that you teach so many parents to do this. And you just mentioned the word inflammatory. So like the title of this talk is Non-Inflammatory Parenting. Can you explain what that means?
Yes, I sure can. So, and again, I want to say up front that there's no parent that, as you said, Carla, that's doing this consciously or intentionally. But unconsciously, what happens to us is that when we are stressed, let me go back a minute. When our children are grappling with some kind of challenge, and it's so hard, to watch your child struggle with something, inevitably what's going to happen is that we are going to raise our stress levels. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to become stressed. Our HPA axis is clicking in every time they do something, and we are going to get into fight, flight, or freeze. Mm-hmm. So, if you're a mom whose natural style, when you're under stress, your survival mode is to show your frustration and get angry and raise your voice, it's changing the child's chemistry. Yeah. That is inflammatory parenting. Mm-hmm. If you're a mom who goes quiet and withdraws and gets sad, or even just frozen for a while and has so little energy and is not reaching out to the child, that is inflammatory parenting. So I think we have to be so conscious of the fact that if I, as mommy, am in fight, flight, or freeze, I am actually forcing my children to go into fight, flight, or freeze too. Mm-hmm. There is no child in the world who's able to look at a mom, even a teenager, who's able to look at a mom who's in either fight or flight, and say to themselves, oh, well, that's mom. She's in fight at the moment, and I'm just going to let it roll over me. I'm going to rise above it. I'm not going to get locked into it. kiddos can't do that. And so what happens is when you're in fight, flight, freeze, they will be in fight, flight, and freeze. And guess what happens then? Or we give them a label. We tell them they have a disorder, but it actually always starts with us.
And then the opposite is true, right? If you learn how to put that child at a sense of ease and they're not in danger, and so maybe we could talk about that. How do you do that? I mean, we know what's going to trigger, this kind of stress response, like yelling, threats, blaming, we got to fix you, you have a problem, like, punishment, all that stuff really comes out of a place of misunderstanding, I think, because I think when those kids, all that pours forth is love. It's not our crap. We just leave that behind, and we're like, this is my crap. This is like this child. I'm just like, oh, your heart just goes out. And that's another thing that you do, Sandy, is make sure we don't forget those kids when we're trying to be disciplinary and we're trying to parent and we're trying to be the boss, and that stuff, like, that sort of dissolves because we understand that child. And then again, all that pours forth is love. So how do we switch over to that state?
I love it. Thank you. Brilliant question. Because truly, I think that the traditional form of parenting, the tools that we've learned over the years have kind of reached a due-by date, outdated, because of the fact that neuroscience has taught us so much more. And so the whole thing of time out and consequences, I shudder when I think about it, because all that's happening at that moment in time when you're telling a child to go time out, you're telling a child, get away from me, go away, I don't want you near me. That's a terrible message. When you talk about consequences, we're rising their stress levels and the inflammation, and the child in time out, their inflammation is increasing as well. But Carla, I want to add another very, very important piece, and that is, you remember I spoke a few minutes ago about the deep roots versus the more shallow roots. Well, we've got the stress, we've got the fight, flight, freeze, we've got the inflammation. The question becomes, what's underneath that stress? Yes, I understand that those children are more stress vulnerable. And then there are some children who actually did not have stress in the womb and are vulnerable as well. So the question is, what's the deeper root? What's the root underneath that's actually causing them to interpret situations and people in their world as stressful? And here is what it is. These children all have a core belief, a deeply held core belief, which of course is a neural pathway, that I am not enough. They believe that they are not enough, and one could add an adjective in there, not good enough, not smart enough, not pretty enough, not athletic enough. I'm just not enough for this world. And it's the most painful belief. Once again, I'm one of those kiddos that have a not enough belief, and all these years I have learned how to deal with it, but it can still creep up when when I'm feeling tired or vulnerable. But imagine being a child. Well, I don't have to imagine, but perhaps you do if you're lucky. Being a child who believes I'm not enough, and looks around, and guess what these children see? Everywhere they see evidence of them being not enough. Their grades are not good enough. The other kids are not inviting them to be with them. There's so much evidence for a child who believes that they're not enough to actually prove, you see, I'm not enough.
Oh yeah.
And that inner judgment, that inner pain of self-judgment is really, really horrible. So for me, the real underlying deep root cause that then creates the stress, because the world feels stressful, is that I believe I am not enough. And I honestly feel, Carla, that there is an epidemic at the moment, and I'm not using that word lightly. Every single child that enters my consulting room has got the I'm not enough belief. And so my new book is The I'm So Enough Brain.
Of course. I love that title.
And
That's perfect. You know what, sorry, I just have to interject just like with a little, I'm just relating to what you're saying so deeply because it takes someone, you know, like it took me until, I don't know, this age or this part of my life to really actually look at my parents and see this sort of pattern, right? Because I'm like you, I had the not enough for sure. And I actually think of myself as a different, that little girl in there, you know, how, you know, there's all that talk in psychology about the inner child. And, you know, when you have rages or when you have this, that, like, you know, when you're angry or you're lashing out, that's really your inner child needing to be heard. And there's so much validity to that. And really, like when you say putting a name to that, like I'm not enough, because that's what it's all about. And I think about my parents, and they're the most wonderful, generous people you could ever meet. But I've never felt enough in their eyes. And it's not that they've told me that, but then when I look at them, or at least my dad, because, you know, a lot of girls have this thing with their dad, right? And, you know, and so I look and I just see him as a little boy now. I see that pain. I see all the stuff he must have gone through, you know, and still is not even recognizing that there's that little boy in there. And that's all I see now. And then I just feel like compassion. And I don't feel like it needs to sort of bleed out into my life. But I mean, obviously children aren't going to have that happen, but just having that revelation and knowing that myself as a parent, that I need to deal with that, you know, that feeding that child, or, you know, addressing all of those behaviors that I've had, you know, because of that root, I'm not enough. And then being able to lead my own children to sort of, it's like breaking the cycle, you know, or like, you know, how they talk about, you know, our parenting, right? Like breaking the cycle and freeing up those kids to actually be enough.
It so is exactly like that. It is breaking the cycle. I do a lot of family of origin work. I talk about what do you bring with you. And it's interesting, Carla, that in every single client that I see, there is either mother and father who have an I'm not enough belief inside of them that they have never, ever addressed. And so the thing is that unintentionally, we could fall into the trap of communicating with our children in a way that we are actually increasing the I'm not enough belief. We're strengthening it by the things that we say.
Yeah.
And you did ask me such a lovely question about, well, how do we rewire these children? Because the I'm not enough belief is so deeply grooved into their brains, because they go there maybe 50, 100, 300 times a day.
Yeah.
So it's a really deeply grooved wiring, and we need to rewire those kids. And you asked that question, how do we do that? Well, first of all, we get parents to understand that the children are actually picking up, because of the interpersonal neurobiology, are picking up on mom's, let's say in this case, mom's I'm not enough behavior.
Yeah.
And they're just watching it and doing the same thing, saying sometimes some of the same words. But then the second piece is very vital, and that is the way in which we communicate to these children. And a I'm not enough conversation with your child versus an I'm so enough conversation with your child sounds completely and utterly different. And so really the tools that I teach parents are around having healing conversations, healing interactions. They don't have to go and buy equipment or change their lifestyle or do anything different other than learn how to go in, find their own so enough self, and then how do they communicate with the children in such a way that the children actually begin a whole new neural pathway. So enough neural pathway. Very, very soft, gentle neuro pathway in the beginning. But as the parents continue to use these tools, the I'm so enough tools that I teach, so that pathway gets stronger and stronger. And the brain does something absolutely phenomenal. Every 3 or 4 months, it does a scan of itself, and it looks for those neural pathways that are weakening. And it does neural pruning, like we would prune a tree with a branch that's weakening. The brain prunes the weakening branches. And so if mom and dad have done their work well and are communicating in a way where the child is beginning to sense from the inside that they are enough, then that old pathway will be pruned and the new pathway takes over.
Wow.
And I do want to say, I know I'm going on, but I want to say one more important thing. And that is that if moms, dads, anyone is listening to me right now, it will never come, you are never going to start a new neural pathway for your children by lecturing to them. There's just too much lecturing and pontificating and being logical and rational and giving them reasons and advice and examples. Nor will you be able to change your child's neural pathway by telling them over and over again how wonderful they are. But you are so smart. Look at that. And you are so pretty. Look at that. Because for those children who are so vulnerable, the message is like going into a bucket with a hole at the bottom, and it just goes in and goes out. So we need to teach parents and teachers how they change the neural pathway so that it happens from the inside out, not from the outside in.
Oh, I want you to tell us how to do that, but that's probably going to be too much. You'd have to read the book, or at least go through the program, because it's a process, right? Like it's a learning process, and it takes time. So maybe we could actually give parents like a bit of a place to start by talking about your 5 fundamental principles that you work with.
Well, maybe a quick tool to take away, so that we're just not talking about it, a quick little one. It's just a piece of a larger tool for rewiring. And that is that if you're looking at a academic, a behavioral, a mood, a learning, a health issue with your children, please don't focus on what's not working. Mm-hmm. Focus instead on what is working. Mm-hmm. So if you can speak to them, well, in fact, what the research shows is that in order for the new neural pathway to take hold, we need to give them 5 positive messages to 1 negative. Mm-hmm. And it's such a natural tendency, Carla, for us to actually fall into the trap of what's not working, and we're going to talk about what they did wrong and what they could do differently, and it's not about that. So I would just ask everyone, do not talk about the problem. Yes. Look at what's behind the problem and talk about what's behind it. And you know what you're going to find? That what's behind the problem is a huge level of anxiety because they feel they're not enough. Yes. Yeah. And so you're not going to say to the child, you think you're not enough, is that right? But you are going to say to the child, I think that you're feeling worried. Mm-hmm. I think you're feeling anxious. And that little conversation is going to make the hugest difference, because the child feels, mommy sees me, mommy knows me, daddy understands what's going on inside of me. The child feels felt. Instead of us trying to fix the child from the outside, let's go in, talk about what's happening there, and we can begin to change it. And it sends that whole flood of the proper hormones and neurochemicals into the system that actually create that sense of peace and calm, rest, digest, all that stuff, right? So it's like, then it's like there's no reason to react this way. There's no ADHD, there's no, learning problem, there's no, like downstream stuff that we're talking about. Like there's no oppositional behavior because there's no reason. There's no spark to, that fire hasn't been lit. So I love that getting back to the root. And I just want to say one thing before you go into these 5 fundamental principles, is that, I've done all of those things that you're talking like, and so, you keep telling parents, like, don't beat yourself up. I have done hey, me too. I have done all of those things. I'm an over talker. I try to explain things. I even said, you know what, I think, and I knew some of the root causes, and then I would reveal them for my children. And then they're like, that doesn't help them, because for one thing, they're not there. They're not feeling it. They're not feeling heard because I'm telling them how they're feeling, even if it could be right.
right? So we need to, like, it's a totally, like you said, a totally different conversation. And it took me a long time because I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was understanding. I was being honest. I was being open. I was giving them
and helpful.
blah, blah, blah. That's what I was doing, right? Like, that's nice that I know this, but they didn't feel it. So another thing about this.
And you know what?
Yeah.
Sorry,
No,
Carly, go on.
I just want to say another thing about this is that it's not just the behavioral stuff that's downstream from whatever this stress is. It's also physical. It's also like, and we're talking about big things like cancer, autoimmunity, like other illnesses, like, skin problems. Like, you think they're not really related, but they completely are. And so, because of the impact stress has on the body, and then they also affect, like, it's all a whole system. They affect each other. So I just want to say that by addressing these things, we can help children. And I actually think it's a fundamental piece of healing children, or helping our children to heal, not just mentally, emotionally, but physically as well.
Yes, absolutely. We have to connect the dots, and the dots are always connectable. And for me, I think that the dots always go back to the stress created by the feeling of being inadequate, worthlessness, not enough for the world, which is a terribly painful feeling. Mm-hmm. So, yes, those symptoms we see, they don't happen in isolation. And I must say that when the clients who visit with me and put this into practice, there are many, I'd say at least 7 out of 10 cases in which they come back to me and they say, Dr. Sandy, you don't have to see David, let's say, whoever it is. You don't have to see him anymore. The change in the child is amazing.
Yeah.
So the symptoms go away. The eczema goes away. The asthma goes away. Mm-hmm. So many things. In fact, I got a text this morning from a client saying that the child's eczema was completely gone.
Wow.
So I think I call what I do the missing link for healing, mm-hmm. and that is just going back and teaching our children that they are so enough.
Yes.
Because that will completely change their chemistry.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And they will then be able to learn with healthier chemistry. They can learn, they feel good about themselves, they love life, they interact well with others, they behave positively. Mm-hmm. It all goes back to that feeling of not enoughness, mm-hmm. versus I am so enough.
Wow. Yeah.
So in terms of, I know you've been trying to get this question in about the principles. Well, first of all, one of the things that I truly, truly believe is that our children have come to teach us something. Mm-hmm. They have come to show us, Mom, Dad, you've kind of got some outdated beliefs, and you're seeing the world in a way that's not as wide as I'd love you to see it, because I see the world differently. So if we're able to get away from this very traditional belief that I'm the parent, I teach, they learn. Mm-hmm. It's not like that at all. Mm-hmm. Our children have come to teach us something, and they so badly need us to know that we are listening, need to know that we are listening, that we truly honor what they bring to us, and that we're not trying to change their worldview, and we're not trying to change what they come with. And so for me, the raising of children is a parallel journey of learning between the parent and the child. Mm-hmm. I also firmly believe that inside every child, behind the challenges and problems that we are so busy focusing on, there is a truly talented, problem-free, extraordinary child who is capable of stepping into their own greatness, their own unique kind of greatness, which is different for every single child. Mm-hmm. I think that unfortunately when we have problems with our kids, we tend to start to believe that they are damaged, or that there's a disorder, or that they are going to, some parents tell me they're going to live under a bridge, or they're going to become like my brother who's manic depressive, all kinds of things. And I just want parents to know that beliefs become things. So please, I want all parents out there, all teachers out there, all healthcare providers out there to know that behind what you're looking at and attempting to fix, there is a truly extraordinary, remarkable child with their own unique greatness. However, to see that greatness, you need to see the child, not through the lenses that you want to see the child. You need to see who the child is for who they truly are. And you will totally change their chemistry. And then there is also the part of my work which says that you cannot give a child something that you yourself do not have. So many parents come to me and they are depressed and they are incredibly anxious, understandably so, and they are stressed beyond. And they want their kids to be lighthearted and happy and go and play and be fun and learn easily and engage and make friends. But it's not going to happen, Carla, because unless the parents are a living example of what it is they are dreaming about for their child in terms of energy, it's not going to happen. So the other principle is that the level of consciousness and vibration that the parent is at will be the level of consciousness and vibration that the child is at. And what I see in my consulting room is truly wondrous. These children tell me the most incredible things, perhaps because they realize they can. And what I've come to understand is that the child comes into the world already knowing the connection between itself and the higher order at a higher vibrational level. So the child enters the world at this higher vibrational level, and then moms and dads and teachers and everyone else with the best intentions in the world say to the child, no, you can't live up there, you can't see the world from up there. No, you've got to come down here, and then you have to fit into this box, and it's the educational box, the family box, the religious box, whatever box, the cultural box, but don't try and stay up there because that'll be considered weird. So you just come down here, fit in the box, and everything will be fine. And it's not fun because it makes the children very sick.
Yes. Okay, so those was that 5? Even now, very good principles.
I got lost, I think I got them all in there.
Okay, well, Dr. Gluckman, I know you have somewhere to be right now, so I appreciate you taking so much time to explain all this for us. We could talk again, like we do another interview and that kind of thing, but I think that you've got some really exciting tools for parents that you could just recap that to let people know how to find your work, how to find you, like. How do they start doing this work that you're inspiring us to do?
Okay, thank you. So my website is www.dr, Dr. Sandy Gluckman, GLUCKMAN.com, drsandygluckman.com. If you go onto the website, there is some free introductory training. So I would really encourage you to just click on that free training, and the videos I keep the videos short because I know that you all have such time pressures. So I try to make them short, but at the same time filled with very practical tools.
Yes.
In addition, there are my blogs. I do write blogs which have got lots of tools and tips in them. My Facebook page, I think, is rather different in the sense that I'm not interested in what I had for breakfast. I'm more concerned in giving tools. So it's about educating, informing, and inskilling parents. So it would be useful for you to go to the Facebook group page. And then finally, I'd like to say that I am about to launch a 30-day online global program where each day there will be a video that will come into your inbox. And for 30 days, I would give you exactly what you would get from me if you came to visit me in my consulting room, tool by tool, step by step. In order to know when we're launching the program and all about it, you would need to sign up for that free training, because that's when I would get your email address and I'd be able to tell you all about the online program. And finally, I also have a complimentary session that I offer. So if you go to my website, you will see complimentary session. Click on there, put in the time you can attend, and let's get to know each other.
So many resources. Thank you, Dr. Gluckman, for creating all of that for people, because it's people like you that actually help us parents to get the right guidance, to get our families really well from the ground up, those deep roots, making them healthy roots. And so I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here, for having that information out into the world and doing all that you do for children, and contributing to the prevention and reversal of chronic childhood illness. So I thank you for being here, and you have yourself a wonderful day.
I hope you enjoyed this interview, and be sure to listen to more interviews from this timely and groundbreaking series. If you would like more information, guidance, and support through your family's health journey, and or want to join our growing community of professionally trained family health coaches, please visit us at healthyfamilyformula.com. Together, we can turn the tide for the future health of our children. May you and your families be well.